Okay, Sgraffito. All right, everybody. So let's see. Okay, so the technique that we're going to be learning is Sgraffito. That's the technique that we're going to be learning and using for our next project. All right. So what is Sgraffito? It's not French. It's Italian. A form of decoration made by scratching through a surface to reveal the lower layer of the contrasting color. We did that with the wax project. The wax project, right? We put colored crayon, and then we put black, and when we scratch the black, it reveals the wax underneath. So you're revealing the lower layer. But back then in the days, they would do it on plaster, which is like a type of cement. They would do it on stucco, same thing, or slip on ceramics. Slip is like another way of saying like a very watered down kind of very liquidy, milky kind of clay. So sometimes you can use red clay and use white milky clay on top, or you can use like a white clay and use red on top. Here we are using white clay and we're using black underglaze. Black underglaze is glaze that does not have any silica in it that turns to glass, so it's not shiny. Okay, it's just a black type of sediment kind of paint that becomes permanent once under high temperature in the kiln. Okay, so what we're doing is the same thing as the wax scratch boards, except now we're doing it on clay. All right. We take the clay and we put it through the machine and we flatten it out for our project, and we make tiles. You can use different kinds of templates. We use squares and some circles, but here you can see that I used even some Tupperware just to get the shape, right? We've already cleaned the edges of our tiles using a felt knife. In this instance, we were using some holes to put on there to hang. Again, here's a round one that we used, and again, some holes. Right now the clay is too dry to do the holes, but if you want holes in it, we can talk about that later and drill some holes in there carefully, of course. Again, the felting knife, we would use the felting knife to smooth out the edges. And we all did this, right, where we cut out our shapes on the table. In these slides, I used a red slip or red clay that had been liquefied or really blended together to be a nice milky consistency, and you would apply it on a white clay surface. So these are two contrasting materials. One is red, contrasting meaning difference. This is a dark red when it's fired, and this is white when it's fired. So we put it on there, and then we scratch our images. Now the images that you guys are going to be using are images that are copyright free. Okay, meaning that they are not copywritten. It's clip art. It's made for student work. It's made for the general public, and you are not plagiarizing. You are not using somebody's creative expression and then using it for your own without giving credit or paying that person back. So I don't like to do that, and we cannot do that in the class. You cannot go on Google Images and start copying other people's work. That's considered plagiarism in here. Same thing in English class. You cannot be copying large pieces of text without putting it under quotes and doing a works cited or footnotes on the bottom of your term paper. That would be considered plagiarism, stealing, and calling it your own. In art, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. But this we can use. Okay? So what you see here is this image right here. Let me see. Right here. Right? And what we did to get to this point, where you can see some ghost imaging, is that we took the back of the image and we put some, in this instance, because it's red clay and it was lighter, I used lead pencil on the back, and then you rub the back, and then when you lay it down on the clay surface, you very lightly start with a round-tipped pencil or a round-tipped pen, and you start tracing your image. And when you trace the image, you're imprinting the substance that's back here. We are going to use white Conti crayon, which is a powder. It's like chalk mixed with a little bit of oil, so it's not so flaky. So we're using white Conti crayon on the back, and then when we put it down and we start tracing, you're going to see a white image appear of the details of the lines, and you can get very detailed. Then we're going to use some sharp tools to begin scratching just the outline. In this level, you don't need to worry about thick to thin, thin lines, medium lines, and thick lines. Line quality, it's not necessary yet. You just want to get the image traced on. So once you get the image traced on, like you see right there, then we'll start working on the ground. And then you can start working on some areas being thicker and thinner to give it line quality, to give it variety, to give it interest. Right? Here we have a clip art image of a mask of New Zealand. So you can see it's very detailed. For those of you that get bored really quickly and you work really fast because you actually focus in class and you're in the zone, there is more complex dynamic imagery here. For some of us that are just hard to focus, maybe not that into it or what have you, I do have more simplified images here. Okay? I don't want to say easy, because sometimes the simplified images require more work with the background and integration to make it interesting. Okay? This is what I don't want to see. Even though, wow, it looks great, it looks cool. Yes, I don't want to see this, because this doesn't belong to the student. This belongs to somebody else that put it on the web. Just because it's on the web, you guys know, it doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. You have to give credit where credit is due. And in art, you can't do a works cited down here. Okay? You can't do that. And I don't want that. I'm not allowing that in class. And it's great training for when you go out there. And if you do study art, you already understand that you just don't copy and, appropriate pieces that easily. Okay, anyways. So, pretend this is the black underglaze, except this is red. You're painting it. But this technique is different. We're not doing this technique. In this technique, the clay is still wet. It's not dry. Then you put some thick, clay on top that's of a different color, like this. And then you start working immediately while everything is still wet. And what happens is that you get a nice lifted surface in here. But we're not going to do that. That requires more skill, and it could be tricky. So, this image, right? You're looking at some roses with leaves, and that's this image right here. This image right here, which is hard to see for you guys, but it's very simple. But what's not here, that is here, is the integration of all of this background. How to make the background go with the foreground, which is the image. In art, we call that figure-ground relationship. The figure, meaning the image, like I could say the owl, the image, that's the figure. It could be a flower, that's the figure. Doesn't matter, it doesn't have to actually be a body. But this is the figure, and then the background is the ground. The figure-ground relationship. Is it integrated? Does it make sense? That's the part where you're going to have to think about what you did when you were working on your wax scratch projects. Right? You did all this ground, background, patterning, texture, lines. There's also those sheets up there that you can use for source material of patterning and texture. You have to figure that out. You have to be creative. Okay, so it's not just trace an image there and you're done. It's trace the image there, and so now what are you going to do with that background? How are you going to integrate it? How are you going to make it more yours and not just a copy? Right? Same flower, same rose flower, but this person did something different with it. Now here's the image of the just this simple butterfly, which is right here. Right? Right there. Simple. But what about the background? In this technique, they decided to use that thing where it's like, like when you throw a pebble in the water and it just ripples. So these are like waves. These are like repeating contour lines. The contour is the outline. So repeating contour lines. But you don't just do line after line. No, you do like medium line, thin line, thick line. So you have to, give it variety. So it's not boring. And this one, they use like these, it looks like metal tin folded rays. They still needed to work on it some more, but this is what they got to. Look at this one where you can see the back, they did a border. I want you to be creative with the border. With this bee, creative border, it looks like teeth. They could have done honeycomb. Here we have stars and dots. We have two things. We have border, or an ornate contour border around the butterfly, and then we have rays coming out. A mixture of rays, contour lines, and these flowers or leaves. Same thing here. So what I want you to look at is how did they resolve the background? That's the challenge. This was very nice. They decided to do these little flowers back here with leaves. These are dandelions, and then all of this is the background, which is right here. Let me see. That's this image. That's this image. These dandelions with the leaves, and then all of this they had to invent. Now, here's a simple image. Here's a simple image where it's this one. Simple. But look at how they integrated the background. They really made it look very Aztec-like. Same image, different way of approaching that background. This is a hibiscus, which is right here. That's this one. The hibiscus. And they decided to do all of these decorations and flowers all around the background. Now this image, right? This person used the parrot right here. The parrot. But the background is from Van Gogh's painting Starry Night. Pretty creative. Okay. The pineapple. I like the pineapple because it's funny. I have a double pineapple right here, but they decided to use only one single pineapple. And then they did, it's like the pineapple, it's like the electric pineapple. It's very pop. It's got electricity all around it. I think this is very creative. I think it's, like wow, Again, you're looking at that ground, that background, how to do it. Here we have the shell, right? The shell, right there. I don't know if we can see it. And the problem with the shell is, okay, so what about the background? And in this instance, I'm telling you, for inspiration, look up henna tattoos. Look up Japanese tattoos. Look up Tibetan imagery. Like the Tibetan imagery where they do clouds and wind and water. It's very graphic. What you're looking for is graphic imagery. Because graphic means that it's kind of very simple and it has a lot of lines and it's not so naturalistically depicted. Right, and then we have like a lotus flower. I think I have one lotus flower here. I gotta look. Now, I have a lot of images. I still have to print a few. I have a lot of images that are about birds, right? Like here I have a cardinal bird. I have eagles. I have fish. Maybe people want fish. They like going fishing. I don't know. But what you're looking at here is an image of the kiln. Now, I have been able to fill up the kiln even more. This is not even fully filled. But the kiln, right, it's back there. I've got two of them. And they are these metal coils that spin around and they heat up through resistance, right? A coil, electricity going through a coil means it slows it down and it causes resistance. The more electricity, the more resistance, the hotter the temperature, right? So those kilns back there can go above 3,000 degrees. But when I'm firing your student grade clay, I really can't go above like 1,500 degrees. Higher than 1,500 degrees, all of this stuff would just start melting and turn like, it will melt. So There is a difference between different kinds of quality of clay. There's some clay that you can fire at very high temperature. It's expensive, it's really nice, it's very malleable, and it fires at a higher temperature. And then you have the clay that we're using, which is like very student grade, which is like stoneware. Right? It's on the very bottom. It doesn't require high temperature. Okay? Which is also, it's actually good for us too, because we use less electricity and it's not in there cooking for a long, long time. Okay? So it looks like that. Now, so now I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a demo. So stay where you're at, and we're going to look at some demos here.